Good morning and welcome to Bolton. I'm Joyce Stilley, the Administrative Officer for the Town of Bolton, and this is a live show done the first and the third Tuesdays of each month from 10:30 to 11 a.m. The show is rebroadcast on the second and fourth Tuesdays at the same time period. The show is a continuing effort to promote open communications within the community. And if you have any questions about how town government operates or have an event coming up or would just like to get some PR out about your group, please contact me at the town hall and we'll try to get a show on the air that covers that topic. This time of year, we have one main concentration in the town, and that is looking at next year's budget. And so my guest today is Bob Monroe, Chairman of the Board of Finance. Welcome, Bob.
Good morning, and thank you, Joyce.
So this is an annual event between us.
Yes.
In talking about the budget. And, it starts back with the individual departments and everything back in the fall, then to the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, and then by March 15th, our budgets were given to the Board of Finance. And you've had time to meet with both boards and go through the budgets, but it's a never-ending process.
That's a good characterization. And I'm sure I've shared with you on many occasions, Joyce, I think each time I think this budget year is going to be easy. And in reality, this particular year was in some regards easier. And our work was made a bit easier as a consequence of the reval that took place in town. And I know that we had appeals and stuff. Many of them were granted, et cetera. Right. But I think it was initially a 2.1% increase in the overall grand list, which then I think was decreased after appeals to like 1.9 something.
Right.
So that helped us a bit with cash to support the budget requests. And in that regard, it was somewhat easier and quite welcome, obviously, to see that the grand list actually, as a consequence of reval and new construction that occurred during that appropriate period, actually increased money available to the town
Right.
because of that increased valuation.
And part of the other challenge over the last couple of years is towns always relied on the governor's budget, but in the last couple of years, we really didn't feel comfortable using it. It had so many things in it that were just debatable in the process. But this year, the new governor coming in, while there are changes to the budget, it was felt that that's probably like a worst case scenario for us.
I would agree, and with your help in educating me in these many years, that's what we did. We've always taken the governor's budget and looked at it, and true enough, 2 years ago, there were so many moving pieces to the governor's proposal. It was hard for us to really find a place to plant our feet and work from. But I did provide a framework to the board at that time, and we moved from there, and ended up with a successful budget in the end that prepared us for going forward into some really unknown territory in regards to the state budget. And in the end, it all worked out well. And last year there was actually a slight decrease in the tax rate by about 1.25%. I think that relates to about a third of a mil or so.
Right.
And so that was, I think, good agreement for everybody in that regard. So this year, yes, there's fewer moving parts in the governor's proposal. One of the initial ones off of Governor Lamont's proposal would have been for and is still in existence, the possibility of all the towns being required to participate in funding for the teachers' retirement system.
Correct.
And Bolton's share of that was scheduled to be $42,000.
And we should say that's year one. It
Yeah.
goes up over the next 2 years additionally.
Correct.
It's a 3-year plan essentially to get us up to a percentage.
Right, that and the combination, the other moving part would have been the equalization of the ECS grant that the state's been working on a statewide basis, and that was scheduling us for this year for about, I think, $117,000 less money. So the net cumulative effect of that was a little over $150,000 less,
Right.
either a combination of less money coming in or more expenses. So we've budgeted that in, and that's baked into our budget proposal. As you were mentioning, there's also talk about a hurry-up schedule as far as phasing in this ECS, which does have the potential, if it came in, I believe, of adding another $83,000 to, or decreasing our revenue by another $83,000.
Right.
And it's hard to say how this is going to go at this point. I think that the state's financial position is going to be, in the end, determined to be far better than the prognosticators believed to begin with.
Yes.
And in fact, I think that there will be a considerable boost in the rainy day fund as required by the state budget. Anything over a particular percentage of the total state revenues has to go into the rainy day fund and is not available or defined as surplus. The surplus is set aside at that percentage rate, and the rest of it is required by the last budget, which is a law, to go into the rainy day fund. So I really believe that we're going to see a very, very substantial boost on the state's rainy day fund, and I think it should probably approach, an additional about $1.7 billion this year. We'll see. It's still
Yes,
up in the air.
yes.
The tax receipts are coming in now, and for the most part, they're predicting a pretty much on par with their projections, which were revised upward as a consequence of what they'd seen in the first 3 months or 3 quarters of the fiscal year. So I expect that to actually continue and improve further, which may in fact then lessen the state's position as far as aggressively impacting the equalization of the ECS and the teachers' retirement. It may have that effect. It's unpredictable at this point.
And along with this, we probably should have started the show with 2 important dates coming up. The first being April 30th, which is next Tuesday, that is a public hearing on the budget. The Board of Finance just took action on the budget last night, so staff is working diligently to get it to the town clerk's office by tomorrow morning for people to see. But certainly we encourage people to come to the public hearing at 7 p.m. on April 30th at Bolton High School Commons. The referendum on the budget is scheduled for May 21st, so another key date for people to remember. But Board of Finance action last night actually considered several things, and one of them has been an ongoing discussions between the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen. I believe Sandy had brought it up when she was a guest on my show that we've been working on shared services with the retirement of the facilities director at the school. We had proposed having a town-wide facilities director. And Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed have both approved basically the agreement for the town to take over that position. What that means for the town side is we had a part-time seasonal person in the budget because of the Greenway, but we now need to make that a full-time maintainer because we're basically losing the work that supervisor did. So adjustments to the budget last night first looked at the impact of that, and the Board of Finance increased the town's budget by $85,000 and did decrease the Board of Ed's budget by $85,000 for basically that shift. The Board of Ed has additional monies in that, and looking at it, there's $30,000 to $40,000 increase or savings overall to the town by making that shift in just personnel costs. Overall, we'll continue discussions on other things, and there's potential for other savings down the road.
As you know, I've commended both boards for their work on this approach to shared services. And it's not the only area that you, as the Board of Selectmen's rep and the Board of Education, have pursued several endeavors that have been successful, not the least of which had to do with health insurance this year.
Yes.
And getting involved in what was then termed the E-CHIP program, which was a consortium of, I think, 8 or 9 towns, if I remember correctly, and basically providing a much larger population of experience for the insurance companies to bid on, and we become the beneficiary of that. So that was yet another thing. And I get this from what you've been telling me. This looks like this program is going to become Connecticut CHIP, and
Right.
and potentially involve many, many, many more towns in the state of Connecticut. And what I believe the inevitable consequence of that effort would be lowered costs for everybody as the population of experience gets larger and larger and larger, providing a chance to spread out the liabilities and resulting in lower premiums for the town. So it's a very good thing, and I think you guys deserve to be commended on both boards on that. In regards to this particular aspect of shared services, it was something that I had the opportunity to attend some meetings on.
Yes.
I was very impressed with the approach of both boards to this, in particular paying attention to the very specific duties that had been associated with the outgoing facility supervisor for the Board of Ed. And this is just a very logical application of the additional supervision that would be taken on by a person that already had some supervisory responsibilities in the town. As you mentioned, we are going to need to have a full-time maintainer to replace, because all of our supervisors are working supervisors.
Correct.
It doesn't matter whether it's the Board of Education or Board of Selectmen. They do some supervision, but they continue to work alongside their coworkers. But anyway, this is an opportunity to consolidate a couple positions and save a little bit of money going forward. And in our budgets, every little bit of money counts.
Definitely, definitely. So that was one of the first things that the board needed to address last night, was that change in where that position was going to lie and the cost impact of it. Further actions by the board, you've looked at the budgets, and there's typically becomes more challenging to identify, well, you don't need that, areas to cut. But basically, both boards, by charter, you give us a dollar amount, and we need to reduce it by that. And that's after the budget is passed. But what you proposed last night was a further reduction to the town of $50,000 and a reduction to the Board of Ed of $109,120. In addition, you lowered the contingency fund from $226,000 down to $91,000. Comments on those changes?
Well, each year, getting to the point that we achieved last night, in an agreement among the majority of the members of the Board of Finance to produce that number that you're speaking of. And it's a number for the Board of Selectmen for expenditures and a number for the Board of Ed for expenditures combined. And we have that one single number, which is what the residents see at the referendum. is that one number, and which is what we're authorizing to be spent for the entire town for the upcoming year. You know, I'm reminded of an old saying that, you know, one thing you don't want to watch is a law being made. If you could make it analogous to
Yes.
a budget being a law in the town, which it is on the state level, and watching sausages being made.
Yes.
This, in essence, kind of got to that point a little bit last night with an attempt to try to get everybody's opinion considered and molded into some plan for action. And that was accomplished. We did recognize the shared services component, but also we wanted to look at and address some reasonable reductions in the request for new money from both boards. That was accomplished, but in large part, some of the heavy lifting for that was actually done by using monies out of the contingency fund,
Yes. Yes.
lowering that. I have some real mixed feelings about that, quite frankly.
Oh, yes.
But the good news is that the board did come to an agreement. The path forward right now is clear to go to our town meeting next week, which I consider this as just kind of a dry run through.
To a certain degree, yes.
Yeah. The only thing we don't have is questions coming directly from callers or whatever. But we'll have that meeting, and we will be putting forward a budget recommendation to the town that will not increase the mill rate at all, and still support to, I think, the very most that we're capable of financially with the board's requests. So we have achieved that point. And assuming that nothing changes as a consequence of the town meeting, no more compelling information is offered that would require rethinking of this position that was taken by the Board of Finance and was supported with a 5-to-1 vote and one absent person. So I think that it should probably move forward along these lines and go to referendum, and what will come out at the referendum is that this will be a budget recommendation by the Board of Finance that has no increase in the mill rate.
And so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned reval before, but so it's the same mill rate. So what an individual property owner needs to look at is actually what changed in the value of their house. Mm-hmm. Mine, for example, went down slightly. So with the same mill rate, my taxes are going to go down slightly. That's about a third of the people had their values go down. Mm-hmm. About a third of the people will see absolutely no increase, and about a third of the people will see some type of an increase, depending on what happened to your value.
Right.
This becomes the difficult thing to explain every 5 years as we do a statistical or a full revaluation.
I happen to have been around long enough now on the Board of Finance that I was there for the last one.
Yes.
And that reval came on the heels of the 2007-2008 recession, and home values had really had plummeted, really. So this year, as I mentioned a bit earlier, to see the values of the properties of our townspeople actually increase in value. It wasn't that $9 million wasn't entirely the reval, because there was some construction and stuff that would be new construction that would be fed into the grand list total. So, but it was certainly not the type of impact, negative impact that we had 5 years ago, which was just very difficult to try to explain to the taxpayers.
Yes. And that's the challenge, is always, how are revenues coming in? Our tax collection, again, our tax collector does a great job. We always slightly exceed what our collection is expected to be on the personal property and residential. Motor vehicles, we've learned a little bit, doesn't come in quite to the same, but we had never tracked it separately before, but because of all the talk at the state about the mill rate for cars, we started tracking it separately. But she does a great job with the collections, and that's been a benefit to the town.
That was another additional benefit that allowed the consideration for this budget. I can't remember that number exactly, but I think that the collections in the prior year, this would be monies owed to the town of Bolton for more than a year, and that is it kind of builds up on the books over time. Well, in the last several years, through the efforts of the tax collector and her staff, they've been really whittling that down, this backlog. And in fact, I think this year, I mean, they collected, I think it was over $109,000
Yes.
in excess of what we had anticipated. So it was a terrific effort on their part. It does have, for the Board of Finance, a long-range consequence that we need to be mindful of and keep thinking about, and that is that what was accumulated as debt to the town before has now shrunk considerably. So our opportunity to collect monies previously owed has shrunk dramatically as a consequence of that effort, but it did provide a substantial increase in revenue for us to bring forward toward this budget consideration that we just concluded last night, the first step.
And we probably should mention that the budget expenditure that the citizens will be asked to vote on is $22,253,789. And one of the other items that went up this year slightly that we should at least mention is capital improvements. And the list is never ending of capital reserve projects that are necessary. And, we're limited in our financial ability to meet the ongoing needs, but we try to consistently come up with a plan that meets the needs of the town.
A very difficult balance.
Yes.
And one of the we have to look long term too. At the same time, we have space needs that are really pressing. Town staff need to be moved out of Notch Road, which is a deteriorating building, but we at this point really have no place to put them. But the consolidation of the town staff will eventually, provide us some additional efficiencies and opportunities, which I'm looking forward to. But we do need to find a way to come up with some more space.
Yes.
And that's a situation right now where it's hard for us to even conceive of going forward, even though the need is pressing. Because of the fact that it would require additional borrowing. So we all kind of, as you know, you more than I,
Yes.
and the town staff continue to patch and repair and try to stop leaks in Notch Road to try to keep them at least dry while they're working. But I don't know exactly how and when we're going to get there, but it's something that's pressing in my mind. I know it's in yours.
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
we need to find some way to get there.
The unfortunate part in moving forward with, even after we got the structural engineering reports on Notch Road, was the possibility of shared services, which has taken additional time to work and develop. And my leaving has taken additional time and efforts to concentrate on that. But certainly in the opportunities and challenges for the incoming person, Notch Road is one of them, and furthering shared services is another thing for them to be working on.
Correct. One of the things that we had looked at some time ago, and it continues to be on the radar, but what took precedent in the discussions between the town and Board of Ed this particular year was the fact that an announced retirement coming up in a position that had some opportunity for consolidation. But there may be others. I had read, some years ago, and we have had some discussion between the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education, and I was particularly interested in looking at the financial sections of both the Board of Education and the town, and looking at the possibility of synergies, cross-training, and being able to handle changes in workflow for sickness, vacation, whatever. I think that there's some eventually going to be opportunities there. But in my mind, the drawback to proceeding on that level is an inability to have the staff working side by side. I really believe that there's a lot of positive things that happen from that by having people close by, and how one can help the other quickly, and maintain a very smooth running work environment as a consequence.
And we're getting down to a few minutes left, so I want to leave some time for you to just give an overview again of what you think about this budget and the process and moving forward.
Well, I think the most important thing, and coming from a person who was thinking finance all the time and money, I think the very most significant aspect of this is that what we're proposing is no change in the mill rate. And when you consider this on the back of a previous year that had 1.25% decrease, I think it exhibits a very good effort on the part of both boards to spend their money wisely and efficiently, and in order to come up with a no tax increase, with caveat being some people might and some people will have less, is in my opinion a very worthy goal. So that was achieved. But again, as I say, sometimes it's kind of like watching sausages being made, and compromises need to be made.
Yes.
And in order to advance the process in a timely, in a required timely fashion. So we've accomplished that. I think both boards will be able to live within those budgets. And I, at this point, don't anticipate that there should be, looking forward, the problems would seem to be somewhat minimal, with the exception of what we've identified on the possibility of the state of Connecticut governor's budget and its possible impact on us. So we're pretty well positioned. Okay. They have to look forward to next year's budget, but because this is a 2-year budget coming out from the state of Connecticut now, and it should make next year clearer before we get to this point.
Yes.
And maybe we won't be dealing with the variables, although fewer than there have been in the past. But maybe next year, we won't be dealing with that many variables, if any.
Thank you for joining me again today. It's been a pleasure working with you over the years. I just want to add that. And just want to remind people of the public hearing on April 30th at 7 p.m. at the Bolton High School Commons. And also thank you to Community Voice Channel for its continued support. And I will see you in 2 weeks.